What's up, primates? I'm Shane the Skeptic, and as always, I thank you for tuning into my channel to watch my content. Today, I'm going to be reviewing, I guess, what I've been up to lately in terms of infiltrating white supremacy chat groups online, seeing what they think. I have to tell you that this is what I was expecting. I'm going to get into these groups. I'm going to see some pseudo-intellectualism, right? I'm going to find out exactly what their ideas are. I'm going to then be capable of steel-manning their ideas, and then upon steel-manning their ideas, I will therefore be able to refute them. The part where I was expecting pseudo-intellectualism, I want to touch on that part. Pseudo-intellectualism would be a compliment for the people that I encountered online, to be quite honest with you. These are quite simply vulgar people who are nothing but emotional. By emotional, I mean hateful. And we got to remember, we like most people recognize that emotional thinking and logical thinking, they don't exactly go hand in hand, right? Like sometimes you can kind of apply logic to things that you have emotions about, and you can kind of make, conclusions that have to do with both of them. But we all know that when somebody tends to be thinking more emotionally, they're thinking less logically. And surprise, surprise, that's exactly what happens when people are hateful. So I will show you some of the screenshots of what I've encountered. I'll then talk about genocidal intent. I'm a little bit, I don't know if I'm going to say well-read on the topic, but if you read this book by Dr. Jason J. Campbell on the nature of genocidal intent, I will say you will be pretty read on genocide. As somebody who actually is a scholar in the topic, writing about it, he makes it understandable to a layman. And so I think that is I don't know, it's a great book. I'm going to be reading part of a chapter when I talk about that. So there's going to be a little bit of an order to this stream. I'm going to have to turn this into a series for the mere fact that there's too much bullshit to really debunk all at once. I'm going to be here for hours. I got to go to work tonight, So let me see. I'm going to look at some of the comments. Happy to see you guys here, those of you who are here. All right, so part one of this stream is going to be about the infiltration. I didn't even get all of the screenshots in. For one, I had some errors with my Google Drive, and I had to figure out which screenshots I was going to keep. Most of it's just vulgarity and hate speech. It's not like you're really missing out on anything because of a lack of some screenshots, but you'll get a general idea of what it was like. And I didn't have time to like censor everything. So if I were to put all the screenshots in, I don't know, YouTube probably take the shit down, to be honest with you. And they still might, I don't know. But I will say in advance, like I did try to convince them that I was one of them. That doesn't mean I went on any kind of a racist rant, but it does mean that I voiced opinions that I don't have because I knew they would agree with me. Well, partially for the sake of humiliating them, and you'll see what I mean by that later on. Part two, I'm going to be debunking biological supremacy, and part three, I'm going to be debunking race. This is actually probably one of the most confusing ones for laymen, because if you grow up, especially in the United States, but not only in the United States, we tend to see race in, I mean, it's a social construct, but it's a heavy social construct for us. So, when somebody starts telling you, race isn't real, the first time I heard that, I thought that shit sounded stupid. I didn't know what people meant by that. I thought people basically meant ethnicities didn't exist. And, so I just thought it was emotional thinking, kind of. So, all right. Anyway, on to the all right. Before I get into the infiltration, I'm going to bring up the 5 foundational claims of genocidal intent. Let me full screen that shit. How do I remove my? No, that'll remove my audio. My bad. I fucking forget how to do this shit. Okay. So I'm going to be addressing the second and third one today. A little bit of the fourth as well. But I'm going to go over all of these again in another stream too. So let's just keep in mind, these are the 5 foundational claims of genocidal intent. 1, the extermination of targeted group members is justified as a final attempt to strengthen a weakening nation. I should clarify here. Targeted group members, with respect to conversation about genocide, targeted would be the group being targeted for genocide, and then protected population would refer to the people obviously committing the genocide, not being killed. So obviously, if we were referring to the Holocaust, protected population would refer to Germans, and targeted population would refer to Jews. Anyway, final attempt to strengthen a weakening nation. That's a very common claim. The second would be that the extermination of targeted group members is justified by the biological supremacy of the protected population. There's a lot there to talk about. The third is the extermination of targeted group members is justified because they threaten the protected population, kind of intermingled with the first. 4, the extermination of targeted group members is justified because of socio-biological incompatibility. 5, the extermination of targeted group members is justified because of their inherent parasitism. One interesting thing to keep in mind about the parasitism aspect is that white supremacists view African Americans as being parasites. And if you think about what a parasite is, Black people in America have been quite literally the opposite. I mean, I don't mean as in host, but I mean as far as the people building the country, as far as people coming up with many inventions that white people later took credit for, not limited to things like rock and roll and peanut butter, but a lot more shit than just that. There are a lot of inventions that there's a lot that was accomplished by Black people that white people simply took credit for. And I'm only even speaking within the context of American history. So the parasitism is just kind of insane. So let's see. We'll go to the infiltration. Okay, hold on. Warning, those of you who, and I didn't put the most vulgar stuff in here. Okay, the worst of it isn't in here. With that said, if you are somebody who doesn't have a high tolerance for like blatant hate speech, you might want to tune this part out. You might want to skip this part. But granted, and keeping in mind, like, what do they think, right? So, all right, let's go. I'm kind of clowning on these guys while I do this, but I'm gonna go to this. Okay, keep in mind if you see the green, that's going to be mine. So prior to this screenshot here on the left, somebody asked something to the effect of like, how do I keep someone I love from talking to N-words? And this guy says, don't force it on her, be smart, out it, obviously meant about it. Give her the clues, but ultimately let her think she's the one taking the decision. There's a book called White Girls Bleed a Lot and Don't Make the Black Kid Mad. Both books are very interesting. You need to explain to her why miscegenation is bad. This is a new term for me. Miscegenation is a word, and it's been used throughout history. It's seen as a pejorative now, so I'm now familiar with the term. But it's just a term that refers to mixed breeding of races, right? So explain to her why miscegenation is bad. Show probably what he meant. Show to her that Jews don't do it for a reason, so we Gentiles and whites also should not do it. And then I say, because I'm fucking with him, right? True. We know genetic variation is bad for the evolution of species, so we should keep our genes as pure as possible. Oh, wait, hold on, I didn't mean to click yet. This guy says, am I actually reading something intelligent here? Can it be true we found intellect on TikTok? Now, I just want to clarify right now. If you know anything about natural selection, if you know anything about Darwinism, if you have the most basic understanding of how evolution works, and you understand that what I just said was undescribably fucking stupid. That is not how it works. Okay? That shit was fucking dumb what I just said. One more time. I said, we know genetic variation is bad for the evolution of species, so we should keep our genes as pure as possible. Okay. Genetic variation is specifically how a species survives the process of natural selection. Very quick example. You're a prey species, right? You have offspring. One of your offspring is faster than the other ones. One of your offspring is smarter than the other ones. One of your offspring is stronger than the other ones. Depending on the circumstances that your species faces, let's say you're being hunted by fast predators, the fastest one is going to be the most likely to survive. So the more kids you have, the more offspring you have, the more likely you are to have one that is fast or has one of these different traits, and therefore the more likely you are to have surviving offspring. So genetic variation is not only not bad for a species evolution, it's pretty fucking important, especially if you're a mammal, okay? Yeah, but just in that paragraph, they thought you were one of them. Yep. And not only one of them, smart. I'm immediately smart to these fucking people. Very happy to see Pat. You know, I thought about hitting you up for this stream. You know what? I'm gonna do a series, Pat. I got to get you on. I got to get you on for the next one because Pat knows way more about this fucking topic than I do. I mean, he's a history professor, so as far as debunking some of the myths and history, I'll get into a little bit of that today. He'll know it. But he also knows a little bit about what these white supremacists think, doesn't he? I got to get you on the next time, Pat. That'll be great. You've dealt with these fuckers firsthand in person. Just fuck with these guys online. Anyway, okay. So we'll go here. Okay. Oh yeah. So I said to this guy, basically like that I said something about the fact that I was fucking with him. I was in multiple different groups, so I was able to kind of take different approaches in each one of them. I infiltrated, I think it was 4 different chat groups. This guy says when I told him what I just explained to you about, well, actually genetic diversity is how you survive natural selection. Look what he says. Oh, he got mad. He got a little bit upset with me. He said genetic diversity isn't required. And by that, I meant mixed breeding animals. He says they mixed bred a dog so bad it was born blind, deaf, dumb, and lame. What you consider to be strengths are actually generational weaknesses creeping up, which will inevitably cause the extinction of said species if said species has been corrupted. Woo! And coloreds, what the rest of the world knows as mixed race, tend to be even more violent than pure blacks in general. So fuck a black bitch, see how your own son might kill you. But by the way, I tried to see if there was anything that supported that second paragraph. I couldn't find the closest fucking thing to an article even lightly supporting it. He says, you're not too far from being from my claws because I will travel the world for war. And we got people that can track by DNA, let alone an internet connection, meaning your doppelgangers can all be in the same place as you. We'd still single one out, same instance. Fucking Americans and your buckshot technology acting superior. So this has really just turned into an incoherent rambling paired with threats. And I've got threats that are like, kind of. But the thing about getting death threats, in my experience, is most people won't make a death threat. Of the people that will make a death threat, I believe very strongly less than 1% of them would ever carry it out. Anyway, but these motherfuckers are crazy, so I don't know. I mean, if you could, maybe, but it says 3 people reading, including you. And besides, I'm doing it firstly to show Shane he's a retard. And secondly, and this guy, I'm guessing, was doing the same thing I was doing because he does not seem to be one of them. This blacked out profile picture. About to tell Shane he's about to die and he's a retard. And then this other one, he's not talking about, he's then talking about black people. He says, there are men, women, children, even their animals. I'll kill them all, especially men who fuck men, women who fuck women, and women who want to be as men. A woman has no strength to stand up to a man, yet she wants to dictate to a man how he can live, who his friends are, which way is right, and all that. It comes to an end soon. What is going on in his life? He says, and the men who allow their women to get away with this, I have even worse waiting for them. Wow, man, he's more upset with the men about women. Women are manipulative, but men are even worse for letting them be. I don't know. Fuck. It's so me. Probably meant to say so many. I'm in another group now. So many Muslims, refugees in Sweden. What about Finland? There's too much N-words these days. Political system's broken. We have a problem with that scum too, but not so bad than you guys have. I don't know why this part made me laugh when he said, "Are you a skinhead?" And then he said, kinda, but I have long hair, so I think no. I don't know. I have long hair. But he said, I like to listen to skinhead music, and they are like foot soldiers of the white race. I look up to them. I even know some. Foot soldiers, okay. Oof. Okay, now this lady here, her name was Astrid. I thought had a more interesting take. She said, I think skinheads make a bad image. What do you mean by that? She said, it's easy to make propaganda against them because of their behavior and then connect the entire pro-white movements to them. Now, let's just think about this. I'm going to take you up on this pretty soon, Pat. So she is saying that she doesn't like skinheads because they make the white pride, white supremacy movement look like it's a violent movement. A movement that entails an ideology which entails genocide. She doesn't like that some people make people who adhere to this ideology look violent. Okay, bitch. That shit don't make any sense. Anyway. Okay, she says, beating up a few of them will actually harm us because it makes it easier for journalists to show us as evil to the common man. But then watch this. This guy says, you're right, but I still look up to them. I'm young, okay? And she goes, that's okay. That's a weird response to like, oh, that group's violent. Someone says, yeah, but I look up to them. Oh, but that's okay. Oh, all right. Okay, now this one, I said, does anyone know why white people are better? I don't mean how, but why? Like, okay, we're less violent and smarter and stronger and faster, and we make better societies, but why is that? Oh, and food. And food. So, but I'm still lost. That's a joke, right? And I said, what a joke. Then I asked later again, I didn't get the screenshot for this part, but well, this is what I ended up asking in my question. And they became on to me when I asked them about this. Was that, like, I'm asking a bunch of other white people who believe that we white people are superior. I'm granting for the sake of argument that we are, and I'm asking why. What is the cause? For example, if it's genetic, what is the gene? Right? If there's a gene that makes us, because if white people were genetically smarter than black people, then you would be able to point to a gene that caused that to be the case, that either existed in white people but didn't exist in black people, or was more prevalent in white people. It's just there are things you would expect to see. There's evidence that you would be able to find of that claim were it true. So, oh yeah, that was part one, infiltration. And I didn't even get it all. I didn't even there was a lot more screenshots than that. I don't know if I even want to go over them in the upcoming stream. I'm gonna look at the chat a little bit. They got mad because you asked. Yeah, they did. And I thought that was interesting because I'm literally pretending I agree with them. And all I did was say, hey guys, what's the evidence for this? And all of a sudden they just kind of figured out I wasn't part of their group. Something about asking for evidence just gave me away as not a white supremacist. Okay. So remember, I brought up the foundational claims of genocidal intent. We're going to go to the second one now, biological supremacy of the targeted population. I'm going to read a little bit of a part of a chapter from this book addressing the logical incoherence of the second claim. But firstly, let's see, I'll put myself down here. All right, I'm going to read some important stuff about racial, biological supremacy, superiority of race. This is from The Raised Question, a rather old book. You should go check it out, see its history, controversy, etc. The concept of race is unanimously regarded by anthropologists as a classificatory device providing a zoological frame within which the various groups of mankind may be arranged and by means of which studies of evolutionary processes can be facilitated. There is no evidence for the existence of so-called pure races, and no scientific justification exists for discouraging reproduction between persons of different races. This would be what they referred to as miscegenation earlier. Assuming I'm pronouncing it correctly. That word is new to me, man. And there used to be like laws called anti-miscegenation laws. So I'm actually kind of surprised I've never even heard the term before. But I don't know. Maybe that just shows my ignorance on history or something, you know. Okay. Let me go back because the part that I'm in is covering. I'm not doing good today. Okay, there we go. All people of the world possess all peoples of the world possess equal faculties for attaining the highest level in intellectual, technical, social, economic, cultural, and political development. The differences between the achievements of the different peoples are entirely attributable to geographical, historical, political, economic, social, and cultural factors. All right, let's see here. People have moved around the world throughout history and had sex whenever and wherever they could. Sometimes these are big moves in short times. More often, people are largely static over a few generations, and that can feel like a geographical and cultural anchor. Nevertheless, every Nazi has Jewish ancestors, every white supremacist has Middle Eastern ancestors, every racist has African, Indian, and East Asian ancestors, as well as everyone else. Racial purity is pure fantasy. For humans, there are no purebloods, only mongrels enriched by the blood of multitudes. From Dr. Adam Rutherford. So, let's see. All right, so we went to credible sources there regarding debunking racial superiority, but we want to get into the logical incoherence of the claim as well. So, all right. So, I'm going to read straight out of the book from here as well. Okay, you've also never heard of the term miscegenation. I'm glad that somebody else is like, I never fucking heard that shit. Okay. So let us assume that the argument for biological supremacy is structured as follows. 1. Since genotype determines phenotype, 2. And since phenotype is an indication of genotype, 3. Then one can use phenotypic variations to determine genotypic variations. 4. Since those bearing certain phenotypic markers are demonstrably poorer, less productive, less educated, have higher rates of incarceration, higher rates of welfare dependency, which I should mention white people actually are one of the largest groups on welfare in the US. Anyway, and also higher birth rates, there must be genotypic factors responsible for their social ineptitude. 5. Since their poverty, lack of productivity, lack of education, inherent criminality, and dependency are biologically determined, and since these factors weaken the nation, one cannot attempt to rehabilitate these people because they are biologically determined to weaken the state. Thus, to protect the state from destruction, those bearing these phenotypic markers bear genotypic factors that are biologically determined to destroy the state. Now, remember what we referred to earlier. I mean, that's already kind of debunked. This argument depends largely on the premise that this is there's biological determination. Via the genotype of a race to have violent proclivities, the stereotypes, all the different ones, right? So, and this author, Jason J. Campbell, he says, as phenomenally arbitrary and irrational as the argument may seem, it is a bit convincing. Phenotype is an indication of genotype. There is a gene for having red hair and freckles. There is a gene for skin color. There is a gene for having blue eyes. There is, however, no gene, nor could there ever be, among an entire population of people bearing certain phenotypic markers, which could be identified as a desire to destroy the state. There is obviously no destruction of the state gene. What these pseudoscientists fail to realize is the role of sociality and social construction. Certainly, desires to usurp national power may be socially constructed among members of a targeted population, but even then, one could not make the general claim that all members within the population have the desire to usurp state power. This is logically incoherent. One is justified in instantiating the existential sum from the universal generalization all, but one can never universally generalize all from the existential instantiation sum. An instantiation is an instance of a general form. This is patently shoddy logic. Thus, on at least two levels, the argument for biological supremacy fails. Firstly, the argument for biological supremacy assumes that everything about human behavior is genetically represented, which is patently false. Phenotypic markers do indicate genotypic variations with respect to some markers. There is, however, no correlation between one's sociability and the social construction of one's interpretation of reality and a corresponding genotypic indicator. Secondly, even in the most charitable of arguments, where one was to entertain the possibility that genes determined everything that we do, one could still not draw the conclusion that all members of a population bearing certain phenotypic markers are attempting to destroy the state because of their collective criminality or lack of intelligence or proclivity to violence, because though one can instantiate from a generalization, one cannot generalize from an instantiation. To instantiate from a generalization is to speak of a particular within a larger set. To generalize, however, from an instantiation is an act of hyperbole. It is to generalize all from some or one instance of a thing. All that is required for one member of the targeted population, all that is required is for one member of the targeted population to outperform any other member of the protected population, academically or economically, to completely discredit the argument for biological supremacy. I'm going to read that sentence again because it's really important. All that is required is for one member of the targeted population to outperform any other member of the protected population, academically or economically, to completely discredit the argument for biological supremacy. Thus, the foundational claim that the extermination of targeted group members is justified by the biological supremacy of the protected population is logically incoherent. All right. Oh, Carly is here. Good to see you. I got a few good people in the chat today, so shout outs to everybody. Wanted to look in a little bit more. Okay. So we went through infiltration. We went through debunking biological supremacy. Now the part that I am not the most equipped person for, but I'll do what I can. Debunking race. That shit gets tricky, even for me. But I'm going to get into it now. It's time. The time has come. All right, so let me get to my share a Chrome tab. Okay. Let me see what that looks like on StreamYard. Okay, let me pull this up, read it myself. Okay. Let me see where I want to start reading at. Okay, Richard Lewontin did an amazing piece of work which he published in 1972 in a famous article called "The Apportionment apportionment of human variation. Literally, what he tried to do was see how much genetic variation showed up at 3 different levels. One level was the variation that showed up among or between purported races, and the conventional idea is that quite a bit of variation would show up at that level. And then he also explored 2 other levels at the same time: how much variation occurred within a race, but between or among subgroups within that purported race. So, for instance, in Europe, how much variation would there be between the Germans, the Finns, and the Spanish? Or how much variation could we call local variation occurring with an ethnicity such as the Navajo or the Hopi or the Choctaw? And the amazing result was that on average, about 85% of the variation occurred within any given group. The vast majority of that variation was found at a local level. In fact, groups like the Finns are not homogeneous. They actually contain, I guess one could literally say, 85% of the genetic diversity of the world. Secondly, that remaining 15%, about half of that was still found to be within the continent, but just between local populations, between the Germans and the Finns and the Spanish. So now we're over 90%, something like 93% of variation actually occurs within any given continental group, and only 6 to 7% of that variation occurs between races. Those quotes are important, leaving one to say that race actually explains very little of human variation. Geographically, perhaps, is the better way to explain that 15% more than race or anything else. For instance, there can be accumulations of genes in one place in the globe and not another. Sorry, I'm reading it like shit too. The font's just so goddamn small. But for the most part, that basic human plan is really a basic human plan and is found almost anywhere in the world. Most variation is found locally within any group. Why don't we believe that? Because we happen to ascribe great significance to skin color and a few other physical cues that tell us that's not so. And in fact, though, these may happen to be a few of the things that do widely vary from place to place, but that's not true under the skin. Rather, quite another story is told by looking at the genes under the skin. I did want to start, all right, this is what's most important. What's wrong with classifying race as biology? Scientists have actually been saying for quite a while that race as biology doesn't exist, that there's no biological basis for race. And that is in the facts of biology, the facts of non-coordinates, the facts of continuous variation, the recentness of our evolution, the way that we are all commingle and come together, how genes flow, and perhaps especially the fact that most variation occurs within race versus between races or among races, suggesting that there is no generalizability to race. There is no center there. There is no there in the center. It's fluid. And then, so that, let me stop the share. Okay. The other thing that I think is important to add to this is that this is a fact that I learned just recently. There's more diversity within the continent of Africa than there is in the rest of the world combined. Think about that. So, like 2 different ethnic groups in Africa could be further apart from one another than, say, someone from Brazil and somebody from Germany. So, I've gone over most of what I wanted to go over today. Granted, I am going to do another stream about this topic, but I also wanted to go into the fact that there are some falsehoods historically that they bring up. And cool thing, I have a history professor in the chat, so if I get anything wrong, the correction is immediate, right on time. So I'm going to talk about a myth that I myself fell for, that white supremacists push. Now, granted, I was never a white supremacist. I've never been a person who was racist. Racist, at least being defined as like having, hatred or viewing ethnic groups or racial groups as lesser. I've never believed in racial superiority. Here's something that they push that I fell for, though. The Irish slave myth. The idea, pretty self-explanatory, is the Irish were slaves too. So we're talking in the context of American history. The idea is, look, black people were enslaved and were oppressed, but so too were Irish people. But if you look at Irish people, they don't seem to be in the same socially in the same place as Black people today. So basically, people start to wonder. And I still understood there being differences in the slaves because the Irish were white. But what I was wrong about was that the Irish were not slaves; they were indentured servants. Now, indentured servanthood is still pretty fucked up, but it is in fact a contract. And if you were an Irish indentured servant in early America, then your servanthood came to an end at some point, and when it did, you would still be like a white male capable of owning land. A white landowning male would be the highest class that a person could be in early America. So if you're capable of finishing a contract and becoming a member, becoming literally the highest class in the country, then no, you weren't oppressed equally as somebody who never could have had that. But also, this is, and that part I already knew, but the term slave had a specific legal definition that indentured servants as a class did not actually fit into. So this idea that Irish people and Black people were equally oppressed, but then Irish people just like fought their way out of it, it is a myth, and it's used to argue. How should I say this? I don't know. I guess it's used to support the argument that Black people are less academically or economically inclined. Now, what I think is important to keep track of in history, Pat says not if they were Catholic. Okay, so they couldn't own land if they were Catholic, I'm guessing is what he was saying. That's important to note. What's important is that gives me some more to think about too. But they were still two different classes, though. Indentured servants and slaves, legally in different groups, right? The other part. Hey, what's up, Jenna? What's the last part that I was just about to talk about? Yes, yeah. Even if they were slaves, they wouldn't have been part of child slavery. Also true. So, oh yeah, the other part I wanted to bring up about history is okay. So part of the white supremacy ideology is the idea. We talked about biological supremacy earlier, and the idea that other races or other groups, the targeted population, whatever it is, in the context of America, it would be Black people, that they're less academically inclined or economically inclined. Think about what's done to maintain this idea. If you look at the Tulsa massacre, right? Which, by the way, I didn't learn about in school. I didn't learn about the Tulsa massacre until I was in my 20s, and also there are various other massacres just like it that have taken place that I don't even know about, or I'm at least aware that those massacres have happened, but I don't even know all of them. So I need to educate myself more on that later. Pat, maybe that's something you could help me out with. But Tulsa, what the significance of it is, you had in early America, you had or in the 1900s. I'm trying to remember which. Let me look up real quick what year the Tulsa massacre happened in, because I don't want to come at you with false fucking numbers. Tulsa massacre. Okay, hold on. Okay. 1921. May 31st to June 1st, 1921. So basically, as you know, there was segregation, right? You had cities that were Black cities like Tulsa where the economy and the people were actually thriving, and white supremacists showed up and massacred them because they need it to be true that Black people could not have a thriving economy, could not thrive as a society, right? And I think this kind of calls into question whether or not those people actually believe their own bullshit. Because we all know when people are wrong, there are people who believe their own bullshit, and there are people who know they're full of shit, but they have some kind of agenda. When people we're going out of the way to actually step on thriving communities, it kind of makes it seem like they realize that these groups were not actually incapable of thriving if they saw them as enough of a threat to do this. So that has been a lot for today. Anyway, I fucking just being in those groups, seeing, because granted, I didn't show you guys all the screenshots. I just showed you some to get you like the gist of what the conversation was about. We see that white supremacists, they seem to think very often that not only that race exists, but that races are different like subspecies. What I want everybody to go do after this, because I want you to fucking fact check me and not even just assume that I'm right about everything, is ethnicities are not subspecies. So, like, if you are an Asian person, or you were a black person, or you're a Hispanic person, you and I are more related to one another than, say, a poodle and a German Shepherd versus a Chihuahua and a Golden Retriever, etc. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not subspecies. We're all not only the same species, we're the same subspecies. So you're not mixed breeding anything when you reproduce with somebody of another ethnicity. That shit is fucking stupid. And yeah. So I want to say to everybody, if you ever engage with these people in chat groups like I did, keep in mind that not only are you at risk of the fact that they're violent people, they might try to track you down and attack you. And if any of you fucking white supremacists end up watching this, just know that I live in an open carry state with stand your ground laws. I'm going to leave it at that. Be careful. Y'all motherfuckers be careful. But the other thing that you take a risk on when you talk to these people is really becoming radicalized yourself. And you might think, either because you're a white person but you're progressive, or because you're not a white person, that you're not going to get tricked by these people. But if they're good at one thing, it's trickery. If there's one thing that they know how to do, it's trick people into accepting false premises. And if they can get people to accept these false premises slowly over the course of time, what they do is they try to make out some kind of a coherent ideology between them. And this is one of the reasons a lot of people say that the best thing you should do is actually just not interact with them, just not talk to them. You are at risk for radicalization. However, this is something that I've thought about. If you are well versed in logic and epistemology, you have critical thinking skills, and you familiarize yourself with some of the relevant truths to the conversation, i.e. some of the history, then you can prepare yourself to talk to people. Just know that if you're ever going to talk with any form of a radicalized person, some extremist, especially a fucking violent person, that you want to be prepared for it as far as critical thinking goes. You want to be equipped with epistemology, logic, know how to identify errors when you see them, know how to point them out to people. Anyway, I appreciate everybody tuning in. This will not be the last of this series. I mean, maybe it'll just be a 2-part thing, but I don't know. At the end of the day, if you're a white supremacist or a white nationalist or white pride, whatever, and you're watching this, before you get emotional, instead of telling me that I'm an N-word or I'm an N-word lover or I'm a cuck or I'm a fucking, you come up with your insult. You pick one, put them all together, come up with a new one. I don't care. But you can do that if you want to. But I'm just saying, after that, objectively, factually, what have I been wrong about today? When I talked about biology, when I talked about race and ethnicity, what have I said today? If you're somebody who is a white supremacist, make a fucking fake account if you're scared. Message me if you're scared. I don't give a fuck what you do. Tell me what I got wrong. I'd love to hear it. I don't expect that to happen, because I think that at the end of the day, yeah, your shit's done. Blathia says, the crazy thing about the Tulsa massacre is that it was anything but an isolated incident. See, and I know about the Tulsa massacre, but I don't know about the other ones like it. But I know that what you're saying is true. It wasn't an isolated incident. I found out later in life that even Central Park was once a thriving Black community. Thank you for this, bro. And thank you for letting me know. I didn't know that about Central Park. Obviously, I'm going to look into it to become more equipped with it. But I believe you. You're a credible source of information. You wouldn't just be saying that for no reason. see. He says, because of the way I look, I have them dumb fucks think I'm one of them. Hey, I feel it, man. I fucking normally have my hair like this or shorter, so sometimes I'm sure people think that shit about me. But yeah, everybody, the main point, and I know I'm kind of repeating myself here, but I'll say it once more before I go, is that their ideology is not only predicated on demonstrably false premises, it is also logically incoherent. The most embarrassing thing you can have, philosophically speaking, within an ideology is to be both logically incoherent and false in your premises. Because remember, there are different versions of being wrong. You could have true premises, but be incoherent, right? Logically incoherent. You could be logically coherent, but have false premises. But there's nothing more humiliating, philosophically speaking, than being both of those, which is the case with white supremacists. So, there's just, if you adhere to white supremacy, you are an emotional thinker. Let's not forget, everybody, once more, that hateful thinking is emotional thinking, and emotional thinking is not rational. Peace. Be safe.